Hello, this is Marco from Axel Tech, and today we're going to talk about our channel in a box product XTV, especially talking about how to manage live sources inside the XPlayout application. So first of all, there are two ways of managing live sources. There's a more traditional way, that's how I like to define it, and a more modern way. So let's start with the traditional way. Traditionally speaking, live sources are connected to external equipment like master controls, video switchers, routing switchers. So simply the application takes control of the external equipment and sends the commands to the external equipment in order to switch to your live sources. So the live sources are connected directly to the external equipment, and there are several options you can choose how to control them. Let's say the most basic one is a serial connection, which is a RS232 or an RS422 port, and you can define the characteristics and the parameters of the port directly into the settings, connecting, of course, looking at the manual according to the routing switcher that you have and so forth. And once you've done this, simply the system connects to sends the commands to the external equipment. Once you've done this, what do you need to do? Well, first of all, you have some routing switcher syntax. So there's a document for this inside your XTV folder in the XTV docs. Let's see if I find it. Here it is, the switcher syntax. So each routing switcher has its own syntax usually. And with this simple document, you can actually send the right characters on the serial port. And simply there's a way of sending characters just between quotation marks as a normal string, or you can use a decimal expression for the ASCII characters or a hexadecimal expression. Of course, you need to look into the manual and see what are the right characters to send in order to switch an input to an output, etc. There are some examples here as well, and if you need help with that, well, just drop in a mail and we can help you with that. So, and that's how you do it. What else? What other type of devices you can hook up to your XPlayout system? Let's go and see. So routing switcher, of course. XRouter. XRouter is an application which essentially allows you to share that routing switcher on the network. So if you have a serial device, of course, usually you only have one serial port, and maybe you have several XPlayout systems that need to communicate with the same routing switcher. So what we supply is external application, which is called the XRouter, and simply you install this software on, usually it's on a server on the network, and you connect the serial port to that server. And the XRouter is essentially a bridge which allows you to have to share that serial port on your local area network. And then, of course, we have a Blackmagic Video Hub. So essentially, this is a IP connection, IP type of command. And what you do is you put in your IP address for your device for the Blackmagic ATEM series also. For the TriCaster, we also have vMix. We have a Grass Valley native protocol and an Azure Kumo protocol, which is actually the Azure Kumo protocol is actually a Grass Valley protocol. Simply the numbering starts from 0 instead from 1, and we'll talk about that syntax. So I have a Blackmagic ATEM. Let's go a practical example here. So I have an ATEM switched up to the system, and this is my ATEM. And as you see, I have my IP address here. So what I do is I simply configure that same IP address here. By the way, in order for the ATEM to work, you need to install the ATEM software on the same computer where you have your XPlayout running, because it uses local libraries. While for the other IP, there's just simple IP commands. For the other IP devices, you don't need any extra software. So once you've done this, the first thing you need to do is simply tell the system where your output, where your SDI output is connected. In this case, I have a Decklink Dual card, and I'm telling with this syntax, which is the simplest syntax that you can use. It's input, comma, output, input, comma, output. You can send multiple commands as well. So here, I'm simply saying put the first input of the ATEM switcher on the first output, which is for the ATEM are MEs. For routing switchers, maybe you have multiple outputs, like 32 by 32. So here you will define actually on which output you want to do the switching. For the ATEM series mixers, this number represents the number of the ME. So if you have a small ATEM, you just have one ME, but you could actually send the commands in order to switch to different MEs. And then we start defining our external, our live sources, and you do this in the line section. So in the line section, what you have is line 0. Where the line 0 is a special input. It's actually what appears when the play out is in stop mode. Usually it'll go just simply to black. But you can define a live input also in your black background. And this is usually used for like advertisement insertion systems. So simply when your advertisement is on air, it will go on air, but when you press the stop button or simply the advertisement finishes, instead of going to black, you'll get your live input, which maybe is your network input or something like that. Let's go with line 1. So I have a test input here. I'm telling the system just routing. I can give a name to it, okay? So essentially what I can do is insert a clip. Let's go with that. And I'm going to edit the clip, and I'm going to put just a very mark out, just a 5-second mark out like this. So it's short. And then I'm going to insert a live event, which is my test event for another 5 seconds, okay? And I'm going to loop that. I'm going to press play. And if I go to my ATEM, okay, what I'm going to show you is that it switches. In this case, it's not switching. Why? There's a button here, which is switcher. I have to enable that. And with that enabled, the system actually every time the files will go on air, it'll put your XTV. Every time your live goes on air, it'll put input number 2 as defined in the syntax. This button is there because in old master control system, which were also kind of expensive, there was a specific button on the remote panel that allowed you to enable or disable communication with the automation system. In this case, I'm using an ATEM, which is kind of a, it's actually a production mixer, but it also manages audio follow video, okay? So, and this allows me to use it as a master control. And in this case, the panel does not have any enable or disable, let's say, remote commands. So that's why you can use this button. Maybe you want to do some tests which are affected without affecting the on-air process. You can do that, and then when you're ready to make things automatic, you just put your switcher back on. So that's the traditional way of doing things. It has pros and cons. Well, the pros is that your live sources are actually not going through a computer. You're using a hardware external equipment like a routing switcher or a master control. It's supposed to be probably more reliable. And also your live sources, usually if you use an ATEM, they're kind of real time. You don't have delays. It's you have a multi-view output. You can view all your sources. It's kind of a, let's say, a preferred way of working for big TV stations which have a traditional architecture, let's say. The cons. Well, one of the cons is that if you have CG, you know that XTV has an internal CG. Well, actually, when the live source is on air, you'll lose that CG. See, the CG now is on black, which is my live sources. Why? Because the live source is actually switched externally. So the video signal is not passing through the XTV, and so you're not going to be able to use the CG layer on top. What else do you lose? Well, the other layer, which is our squeeze back layer, we'll see it in a second now. Just a few seconds, come on. Squeeze back layer, please. It's coming. It's the first time I put it on there, so it's calculating. There it is. Okay, and my squeeze backs. So you won't be able to use that as well. And if you're streaming out and you're using the IP streaming section, you won't be able to use that as well, simply because XPlay out is not managing the live source. It's actually routed externally, okay? There is a workaround I want to talk to you about on this, which is for the manual CG. So let me take this out. Okay, I have my CG. So there is a way of configuring the system in order to actually separate the play out output, which is this guy over here, and of course you can have NDI as well, and what is the CG layer. So if I go in the CG layer here, and I'm going to tell the system enable a separate different audio-video device for the CG, and you can use let's say a physical card. In this case, I'm using the DeckLink, and look at this. Have an external key parameter. You can also do this in NDI. So let's restart, and I'll show you what happens. So if this is my card, which I have over here, which is a Blackmagic card, and I'm using one connector as a main output, I can use two other connectors, and that's kind of important, to generate my key and fill. So in order to do this, of course, my first connector is in one connector mode because I need only one, but the second card, I should put it in two connector mode in order to get key and fill out of that. So then these three cables, I can connect them to my ATEM and configure my downstream key section in order to use those two connectors, and I'm going to use the DSK to put the graphics on there. So what happens is I have a new button here, and I want to show you that if I put on air something, well, I'll have my main play out with my main channel, main output, which will have the actual file playlist or whatever here on my playlist. And the CG is on, but the CG is actually playing on another output, on those two connectors. So if I click here and that's the new button, I'll have the preview of that separate channel. So in this case, what happens is that if you insert your line input, okay, which is traditional, external, etc., and I go on there with that live event, okay, so let me go to manual so it continues. And it counts backwards, so I decide when the live finishes. So my live is on air. Of course, I have my black on air here because the video signal is routed with the external equipment. And at the same time, I'm actually generating my logos, my crawls, my graphics for my station, and those are actually being output in key and fill or an NDI on the CG output. And so the ATEM mixer will be able to actually downscreen that, and I will get my graphics also over my my external live event, live source. Okay, so that's kind of cool, and it's a way to overcome the limitation of the fact that I don't have my live source, which is passing through the system. Of course, squeezebacks will not be available on live events. They will be available only on the on the main playout. So it's doing the squeezeback, but of course it's black. And also IP streaming will not be available since I'm streaming a black video. Okay, so this type of work, this type of configuration will actually allow you just to have the overlay graphics. So let's take that out. Okay. And I want to show you now that we've talked about the traditional way, I want to talk to you about the modern way. The modern way is actually hooking up some video inputs to the XPlay out. How do we do that? Let's go in line 1, and this time I'm going to call this an SDI input. And instead of the just routing here, I'm going to select the audio video input device NDI or WebRTC. So this configuration button actually is available, and if I press it, I'm actually going to have a preview of my devices. So in this case, I hooked up a video input to my Decklink Duo card. Oh, it's not going so smoothly, so let's try and reset that. Okay, here I have my generation, so I'm going to tell the system, okay, reset that. A little better, but doesn't matter. It's just to show you that I have my video input card here. And so you can select your input card, and I can press the set button. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the second input as an NDI, and I'm going to tell it it's an NDI. And in the NDI, I will be available to pick up some NDI streams from the network. Okay, so here I have it. Let's see what I have. It will be this guy over here. Okay, I have that as well. Pressing this button will refresh the list, and the list will present my NDI sources, which are present on the network. And I have another type of input which is available here. I'm going to call it WebRTC, which is a protocol, an AxleTech protocol, which can be used with AxleTech products. I'm going to explain that in a while. Let's see. I don't see anything here. Let me press this guy over here. Oh, I lost my WebRTC. Let me get that. I'm going to get it from here. This is my code. And I'm going to explain actually how this works. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. So now I've defined 3 inputs, okay, to my system. The first one is an SDI, but actually it's just a generic audio video card. Depends on what card you have. If you have an analog card or something else, you can actually capture analog or HDMI or whatever. In this case, call it SDI because I have Decklink Duo. And then I defined an NDI input, just picking up a stream from the network, okay, and I'm gonna wait for the external sources to initialize. You have them, 1, 2, 3. Okay, main output. Actually, you can use also these type of live sources in combination also with routing, so that can be done as well. But I'm going to take the switcher out for the moment. I'm going to take the squeeze back out. Okay, I'll take the CG out and explain what happens. Okay, so when you initialize this, the first live source in this way, you get a new button here, which is a live preview. So instead of the clock, you can click on the button, and you have a pane where you can select your live sources. So I have line 1 as a SDI. You have also a nice view meter there. And I have NDI here, which is another video source. I have WebRTC here, and I also have a multi-view. So the multi-view will actually be something like this, okay? And what you can do is you can use these buttons. One of the button which is interesting, well, information button, give you statistics if the the stream is coming in correctly or the device is initialized correctly, some technical data. You have a preview, audio preview, which is interesting. So you get the preview of the audio. It's something like this. This goes to the default direct sound device. What is the default direct sound device? If you go in your control panel and go in sound, that will be the default device, which is selected here in Windows. In this case, I'm assuming this line 1. Okay, you see the green checkbox there. Okay, the TX button is something like an emergency button. It will actually send that live input to the black background. It won't be logged or anything. It's just a fast way of putting something on air if you're in an emergency situation. And what else do you have? We have a restart button. Restart actually reinitializes the devices. So it will be shut down. If you're on air, you'll get black on air, okay? And then it will actually be reinitialized, and you get it back again, okay? So let's talk about the individual settings a little more in detail here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my line and I'm going to show you here. You have a select line. You have to give a name to your line. In that case, it will be available in the list to actually put on there. TX is, if you have a routing switcher, it's kind of nice just to test it out if your routing syntax is working. So TX will send the routing syntax to the external device. Here you have the selection, and we've seen the just routing, and we've seen the audio video device. We'll see the URL later. Okay, information regarding the same info box, technical information regarding that device. Oh, you can change the image which is in the thumbnail which is used when you air it, and default duration. This is kind of nice. When you put something in your playlist from a line, and as you see now, I have my three sources. The duration which is proposed is the default duration. Let's talk about this automatic stop briefly. If I put something on air, okay, let's go with this guy. Okay, oops, bad file, sorry. Let's go with something else. Okay, playlist, yes. Okay, so something like this. Okay, avatar. Okay, I got some issues here. Sorry, I'm gonna restart. Memory issues. Let me just restart a while. Okay. A little bit patience, please. Okay, initializing the sources. Okay, audio video device. Here we go. So I want to show you how the automatic stop works. I'll do that in just a second. Okay, and we're ready. So browse, oh, much better. Starks going on air. I'm actually okay. Take the loop out. Okay, remove that and put my line on there. So if I put my line on there for just 5 seconds, and then I'm going to add another clip, what happens is it's a timed event. So the live will go on air, and I'm on there right now, and after the 5 seconds, the next file will go on air. Okay. So let me take that out, remove, and insert again, and show you the automatic stop. Simply, if I put something else on the playlist afterwards, and I go with my play, I pass that up. As you see with automatic stop, I have, I'm gonna cue that. I have a V in the parameter column. So what the V does, actually, when it goes on air, I'm gonna skip right now, it will go on air for 5 seconds, and then it's going to start to count backwards, and so that because it's in manual mode. So that allows me, if I'm on a live show and there's a host saying when he wants to go with advertisement, and then what happens is I manually skip to the next event. Oh, okay, let's go with advertisement, and there you skip to the next event. So that parameter, the automatic stop, can be set during while you insert the live event, but also just pressing the V on the keyboard. Okay, and pressing the V on the keyboard and toggling the automatic stop. But you actually have it also in the edit clip parameters, and there you have it. So you can, and that's the parameter. Okay, very well. So let's go on. And let's talk about live sources. So in my line 1, I have my SDI with my routing. I can put the routing or not, doesn't matter. And if I go inside, I'll explain a little better. The SDI actually, the configuration, the live configuration that I'm doing right now actually is a completely separate channel. It's independent from actually what's initialized in the multi-view. And this is just so you can play around and you're not affecting what goes on there. Of course, I always suggest, if you're in SDI, to choose the right resolution, not keeping it automatic. You have audio gain adjustments, aspect ratio adjustments, and you can do a little more things. And then you have all the triggers related to that, which can be Q-tones, which can be Scotty triggers. You can actually record that for a specific time and use it as a time shifting, but it's kind of out of the scope for today's training. So that's the SDI. Let's go with NDI. NDI, of course, is a new tech protocol, allows you to send video over the LAN network. And as I explained, when you press this button, you'll get the list of all your NDI available. You can select your NDI, and that's how that works. A few words on WebRTC. WebRTC is it's actually a Google format, a Meet format. And we are using that transport protocol in order to deliver very low latency video over the network. And WebRTC actually, what I'm doing right here, I have an ID. So how does that work? Well, WebRTC is interesting also because you can deliver video on the LAN, over the net, over IP, over internet, without actually configuring any router. So in the IP section, we're sharing these parameters. So you must specify a server. In this case, is an Excel technology server, and specify a room. And those will be used for the live source WebRTC. How am I generating this? Well, you can use, of course, XPlayout because it has a WebRTC output, so you can send WebRTC from one playout to the other. But in this case, I'm using an application from Excel called the Multicross Converter, which allows you to get video, SDI, IP, and kind of convert them, and from one standard to the other. In this case, I'm in the third pane of the multi-view. I'm getting a file, and I'm sending WebRTC output using the server, and simply this can it's used as an encoder, a WebRTC encoder. And the interesting thing is that the delay between the source and the destination is something like 200 milliseconds, so very low delay. And it's kind of interesting as a system. You don't need a special configuration of the router. It works with mobile lines, etc. And so it's kind of a very convenient way to deliver your audio video streams. But you need an Excel application to do that, and so you will need a multi-cross converter in order to use that technology. So good. This is the first part that I wanted to show you, which is kind of interesting. Now I'll show you another way of using live sources, and especially live sources for URLs. So URLs or files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on URL or file, and if I go into the configuration, so I'm changing that. Okay, let me call it UDP because I want to do a UDP, and let's see what happens. So in the UDP pane, what I'm going to say here is UDP, and I'm going to put 127.0.0.1, and I'm going to use port number 1234, if I recall correctly. And then I'm going to press the enter button, okay? And here you already see he's trying to connect, and he's getting a string. Where am I getting? Well, I'm still using the multi-cross converter here. In this case, I'm just creating a UDP from my multi-cross, which is kind of convenient, okay? I'm going to press the set button. But I'm going to do the same here in line 3. I'm going to call it RTMP. And I'm going to show you that I don't need to configure it. I'm just going to put URL file, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to press SRT. And that's another example that I want to show you in line 4. Okay? I'm going to press the set button and wait for the system to restart. So I have my SDI input on my first line in, line 1. And then I have a UDP, which I already configured on my line 2. I have a RTMP, which I still need to configure on my line 3, and then I have an SRT. And we'll see that as the last example, which is probably the most significant one. I have a lot of inquiries regarding how to get SRT into the XPlayout. So let's wait for the external sources to begin. Okay, we have audio video device, and we're done. And I'm expecting, there we have it. I'm expecting to get my previews here. So let's switch to multi-view, which I prefer it, okay? And so my first channel is the I, and I've seen that. My second channel is my UDP. a new button has appeared, a new configuration button has appeared, because when the input is a URL, you have a real-time configuration button, which is kind of interesting. And what does it allow you to do? Well, first of all, it allows you to change parameters on the fly. So if I take that out, for example, of course, I'll change the port, and the port is not the correct one, so it actually it's not receiving anything. So I can change that on the fly and try my settings. Okay, which is kind of nice. Okay, and it's in a synchronous mode, so the system tries to connect all the time. And as you see, my UDP is coming in. What else do I have? I have a history. We'll talk about the history afterwards. A clear history button. Extra parameters mode. There's a long list of parameters that I can use. They're kind of technical, and like if I have a MPTS, a multi-program transport stream coming in, and the parameters, you can actually select which one of the programs you want to decode, etc. This is important. That's the buffer. We're using a buffer in order, to let's say to maximize reliability and efficiency. So a 1 second buffer, it's good if you have a UDP like in LAN, which I have now on my local area network. But if you're getting your source from outside, you probably sometimes need to increase that. The effect will be that the video freezes for a while and then kind of speeds up and then freezes and speeds up. That's because you're having buffer underruns. So you can dynamically change the buffer. And the other thing is the audio level. Audio level, you never know what's coming in, whatever audio level is there. So I'm going to put like a -20, and I want to show you that it's interactive. You see from the view meters that actually this can be changed. I'm going to put 20 now, so I'm going to be very high. And as you see, I can adjust the audio level coming in, which is kind of nice. Okay, let's go on second channel. I want an RTMP here. Let's see, RTMP. So I've actually already selected some things, and I have this RTMP coming from my, it's a cloud service, which I have. So I'm just going to select that, and let's see if I can get the effect. Okay. So that's my RTMP coming in, and there you have it. That's the RTMP. Oh, actually, I have the same source coming in here. So I'm going to go in this one, and yeah, and we call it SRT. So that I wanted to use that as the last one. Oh, one thing about the syntax. SRT, you need an IP and the port, and then the mode. If on the other side you're using a caller syntax, this is going to be the listener. So usually that's how it's done. So the XPlay out will be in listening mode, and whenever from outside you want to call it in, you can do the call in. One thing is, this syntax does not work with the 127.0.0.1, which is the local host. I'm not sure why. I have two LAN cards in the system. That could be a reason. But I think that SRT just wants to know the IP address of the card where you want to receive the stream. So this guy is going to work. So I'm going to reset that. And once I reset that, I'm going to go to my multicross where I have my SRT. Let's see, is it this one? Yeah, SRT mode and caller mode. And I'm going to start the IP here. And let's see if something comes in. Sometimes it takes a couple of seconds. And there you have your SRT coming in. Okay. So as you see, I have an SDI in. I have three URLs. One is a UDP, one is an RTMP. Actually, today the RTMP is going kind of well, even though I just have a 1 second. 1 second is not enough for an NTP. I suggest to keep always like 5 seconds buffer for that type of connection. So when I press the OK, the system will reset. It's actually already receiving. It's filling up the buffer, so it'll take 5 seconds to fill up the buffer, and then it starts. And of course, I have a 5 second delay. So the buffer will actually put more delay. So you kind of have to test your line and see if your connection is reliable, and if you have any issues on the connection and some instability, one way of doing it is hiring a little bit the delay. So as you see in my SRT, I already have a 1 second delay, which is kind of typical. And that's why the WebRTC I was talking to you about is kind of very, very interesting, because the latency actually stays under 200 milliseconds, and you can manage cameras and during live shows in that way, and it's very, very interesting. Okay, I think I'm done for today. We've seen XTV live source management, and we've seen the traditional way of doing it with a remote control of external devices. We've seen the, let's say, the modern way of doing it, both using audio video devices and using also URLs. I didn't tell you this. You can actually specify a file if you want here. So actually here you can go like C, comma, slash, slash, my file dot mp4. Doesn't make much sense. It's just going to loop forever. It can be used if you have like a 1 minute or 2 minute loop, and between programs you want to loop it for, I don't know, 40 or 50 minutes. So, it can be used in that way. So of course, this is not only for URLs, but so for files as well, but mostly used for URLs. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you so much. Till next time.